you so much, Mariam, for that lovely introduction, and thanks for the Armory show for facilitating us being here today. And thank you all for joining us on this Sunday. I feel deeply honored to be on this stage, accompanied by two amazing women artists that I deeply admire, Priscilla Monge and Naomi Gallardo, whose work is featured in the focus section, as well as Miguel López, a dear friend, our historian curator who has dedicated his work to championing and supporting women, queer, trans, and gender nonconforming artists. It's really a pleasure to have you here with us today. In organizing the focus section, it was really important for me to include women artists and queer perspectives from different generations. The overarching concept is the landscape in an expanded sense, as socially and politically constructed, focusing on Latin American, Latinx, and Global South perspectives. One of the main concepts inspiring my work here is the concept of territory, not just as land or geography, but as psychological and ideological terrain that we must navigate. And this is something that has really stuck with me coming from Latin America, especially from activists, that the landscape is really a social and political construction that both lives in the environment, but that also lives within the body. And one of the things that is very much pronounced and proclaimed by these activists is that the territory, our first territory, is the body, is our first line of defense. So the title of the talk is Unruly Territories, because I really wanted to invite both Priscilla and Naomi to present her work and to think about these different concepts in relationship to their work, but also the concepts of the fair. So I want to leave it with that thought, and now I'm going to hand it over to Priscilla Monge to talk about her work. Ready?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Carla and Acevedo-Yates also for being so creative to show my work, and also to the Armory show for thinking of doing these spaces where we can share our views. Also to Miguel and to Monge for sharing with me on stage. My name is Priscilla Monge. I'm an artist living and working in San Jose, Costa Rica. And I apologize that I'm going to read with my English. I don't know if I would just come out with words that you would not know what they mean. So, my name is Priscilla Monge. I'm an artist living and working in San Jose, Costa Rica. I belong to a generation of artists who began working at the beginning of the 90s, where Central America has just signed a peace treaty. And you could see some signs of peace on a region devastated by war and extreme violence. Even if the case of Costa Rica was different, we did not go through such violent experiences. I learned early on that violence is a chain that comes in many different shapes and forms. At that time, Costa Rica took pride of having different situations than the rest of the region, and of a so-called neutrality that was almost impossible with such permeable borders. Our violence was different. It was inside the homes, it was inside my home. As I was learning about violence, I became very interested in camouflage as a metaphor for camouflage violence, the type of violence you cannot easily see or recognize. I come from painting. My grandmother was a painter, and that was a logical path for me to follow. So I started painting at the University of Costa Rica, and while being a student, of the few interesting things I learned in the school was a drawing class, where the teacher told me that I would be able to draw better the things I knew the most. And that touched me in a good way. I started painting, which was familiar to me, but soon after I was using materials that were also known to me, domestic materials out of the art room. Instead of canvas, I painted on fabrics, like the ones you could use to upholster a sofa, like a curtain or a tablecloth. I used to lay down on a fabric and draw, like the first image. I used to lay down on the fabric and draw my silhouette with my body, making the shape of a gun. Then I painted a gun silhouette simulating the actual pattern of the fabric. At that time, it was my way to question and make visible this camouflage violence. Soon after, I started experiencing with other materials like sanitary napkins, embroidery, or sewing. Doing painting alone did not last long. I started intervening by paintings with embroidery, first embroidering my name as a way of signature. Then painting started to disappear, and I used other materials depending on what I wanted to say. For some things are better said with drawings, others with video, and so on. If I wanted to draw better, as that teacher once said, then I should use stuff that was in my domestic environment, that I knew. Stuff that has the possibility of being familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. I was disenchanted with big history. For me, it was not trustful. I rather prefer to talk about the small histories, intimate histories, of the stories that are not mentioned or talked about, of the silence of those stories, of the immensurable. This series you're looking at on the screen are series I did in 1993. There are small embroideries where I change few words for drawings, like in children's books, where you want to make reading easier. The text comes from actual death sentences given in my country up to the 19th century. They are mixed also with some events that were happening at that time in Costa Rica, like police brutality or domestic violence. It seemed to me at that time that even if death penalty was abolished, events that resembled these were and are still going on. This piece, it was for me a turning point. I recognized with this piece the privilege of being an artist, and also I embraced the responsibility it came with it. From 1994 to 96, together with my mother, who's a wonderful seamstress, I designed and made pants of different cuts and models, sewing sanitary napkins together. They were always exhibited as objects, but in 1997, in San Jose, Costa Rica, I did a performance in which I walked the most crowded down the streets wearing one of these pants that was progressively absorbed my own menstrual blood in the padded crotch. It was interesting to me that the garment generally used to protect or hide changed its function completely just by altering the material. It was not useful to hide or protect. It changed its original function. It was showing instead of hiding. It was talking about what we don't talk about, centuries of taboos associated with menstruation, with women being dirty or impure, and turning them into taboo themselves. I was dealing with education, with my own bodily borders, for women not only bleed, they also produce milk and tears. When I did all this work with sanitary napkins, I was not only working with my materials so close to my body, but I was innocent enough to think I could talk not only of menstrual blood, but of blood in general. I could talk of a vital process, but I could also make a reference to violence. Every time I look to one of these trousers or any other object made with sanitary napkins, when I look at the pristine white, it always reminds me of the white shirt of the man inside the Goya paintings of the Fusilamiento del 8 de Mayo. The man's shirt was so white and brilliant that you could only imagine the latent presence of blood. Like in many objects, wall or a fireplace or even a room for isolation and restraint that was completely upholstered with sanitary napkins. I think most of my doing is about uncovering things, about telling what cannot be told, about the unspeakable. In 1993, I started painting entire rooms with black paint and then wrote on the wall with white chalk as if the entire room was a giant chalkboard. In 1999, I made a series called Pencil. I was working with the idea of the chalkboard associated with education, therefore with punishment. Of the education as a haunted place, just like art or literature, but in a more rigid way, with a linear language likely different from that language of art or dreams. The punishments I wrote on the boards were far from innocent school punishments. They dealt with women cliches, with child abuse, and of course some of them had a lot of humor, like I should not sleep with our critics. I believe you have to have humor when you're deadly serious. I started working more and more with the written word. As a shy person, speaking was extremely frightening for me. But it was very different when I wrote. I come from a dysfunctional family, almost schizophrenic, where there were lots of love on one part, but also very violent experiences at some point. So, from very early on, my mother taught me that if you want to have a certain conversation, it is better to do it by means of a letter or a message. I learned the space formed by the letter or the written word was a space of safety, where you do not confront face-to-face the other person. So I learned that writing was a safe place, just like art. In 1998, after doing my first video for the São Paulo area, I got very interested in photography. In the capacity of photography to verify, to authenticate what happened, what you're seeing in the image. I developed a series called The Artist Reveals as Mystic Truth. I was playing with the idea that the artist is beyond its time. The first from the series was a still life of a beautiful served table with a plate of soup. It was an alphabet soup that I used to form the phrase, what is real? Then I did some still life compositions where I used coffee cups in which I wrote phrases with coffee. El arte es cosa de vida o muerte, la palabra es cosa de vida o muerte. Poetry is a thing, it's a matter of life or death. Beauty is a matter of life or death. All the phrases have this maxima of life and death. Then I was a visionary, a fortune teller, reading important messages for the future. Photography, by authenticating everything, is the best way to lie. Recently, I used photography again in one of the works I also exhibited here at the Armory Photos. The title is Los Malos Paisajes, Bad Landscapes. I had 3 different reasons that were the departing point that made me do this work. First, in the past years, I lost 2 very good friends to cancer. They showed me in a very close way the inevitability of death. Also, I lost my 3 very old dogs, and then my garden became a graveyard. But it's true that any piece of land that has these 2 extreme possibilities that apparently are contrary. You can plant, you can grow flowers, and you can bury someone as well. Second, as life is, at this very same time, I was contacted by a friend who knew a young family who had an 8-month-old son that spent his short life in a hospital. When he died, his parents did not have any money to bury him. So, we helped him what we could. And a few days later, the family sent me the photograph of a bulldozer opening a hole in a green piece of land where the child is resting now. Landscape or nature is this immutable witness that doesn't have the ways to do nothing bad or wrong, or to have any morals or ethics. It's just a place that with the right conditions can cover anything that happened there, much like our memory. With time, we began to forget the features of the loved ones who are not with us anymore. We forget thanks, we forgive. I was deeply confronted with the inevitability of death, with the possibilities of landscape, and with pain. Third, I was reading a lot about the role of Costa Rica in Central America conflict during the 80s, in the Central America conflict, when we proclaimed a so-called neutrality. I was investigating, and then I came across the testimonies of witnesses and survivors that declared for the Human Rights Committee and Commissions of Truth after the war. As I was trying to study and investigate the terrifying testimonies using the internet, more images came along. Images the algorithm of internet relates to what I first started looking for. It was an unstoppable flow of images of tragedies in front of me. Then, what to do with all that pain? How not to be in such despair that you simply pass the image with a touch of a finger because you cannot bear to see. Or how not to be numbed by what you see and simply not have any reaction to that horror. I always thought of art as an amplifier that has the possibility to unveil things, using metaphors which somehow open a space for the viewer to pay attention to what normally would be impossible to bear, or in the worst case, just not be of any interest. Art could be a good tool that confronts us with our privileges and with the suffering of others. Susan Sontag's regarding the pain of others confront us with the question of who has the right to look at the images of suffering. She posits that perhaps the only people with the right to look at the images of suffering are those who could do something to alleviate them. And the rest of us are only voyeurs, whether or not we meant to be. Filmados Paisajes is a series of Polaroid in which I strike through with graphite the part designed for the images. It is impossible to see anything. It could be the image of any person. There are no features, no color. It could be me or it could be you in the picture. The only thing which explains us something is the caption written on the down part of the Polaroid. These captions have written testimonies of the people who survived the war. Others are just actual captions of photos from magazines or newspapers. Captions like the ones we write in our private photos, the ones that help us to remember a special event, a special person, a date. Captions that remind us what we are afraid to forget, or in this case, to forgive. Thank you.
Now we will hear Naomi, Rincón, Gallardo, Acevedo.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Carla, for the invitation. Thanks, Alex and Laura from Proximal. And thank you, Priscilla and Miguel, for being here. And thank you all for coming and for your patience. I will focus my presentation in three recent works that I called a trilogy of caves, whose storylines meet in the darkness of mythical caves. A trilogy of caves is composed by A Formaldehyde Trip from 2017, Heavy Blood from 2018, and Opposing Resilience. These three works are queer, mythical, decolonial fabulations addressing racialized women's stories of resistance against the dispossession of their lands, cultures, and bodies within context of unleashed dispossession, state violence, and transnational extractivism, or a colonial necropolis that has become the Mexican territory. In Mesoamerican worldviews, caves are considered to be mouths and bellies of the earth. They are dwelling sites for the deities of night and water. They are observatories for the cosmos, funerary sites, places for rites of passage, and also for the nocturnal forces of dreams. The caves are also sites to enter in conversation with the dead. Although the three works have an independent existence from each other, I nevertheless call them a trilogy because of the plurality of elements they share in common. The three works are plots for oppositionality, Mesoamerican bastardized myth revisionism, and crafty exuberance. A trilogy of caves tries to explore ways in which a queer of color aesthetics can contribute to dismantle the symbolic orders of coloniality. Each of the works is accompanied by an animal spirit. The Formaldehyde Trip is accompanied by an axolotl, this Mexican larva. Heavy Blood has an animal guide which is a hummingbird, and Opposing Resilience is obviously accompanied by an opossum. And each of the works gather a cast of pluriversal characters that get together to re-exist, resurrect, and affirm desire within landscapes of dispossession. The figure of the cave is present as a site for radical openness to darkness and to the realm of death. This trilogy clings to forms of relational bliss and generative indignation as embodied reminders that there are pleasurable forms of being together that are worth striving for. My desire-driven work is both oppositional and affirmative. I use the term underworld making in order to acknowledge the intimacy with death as a constitutive condition for life among landscapes of dispossession. As we know, colonized territories often become zones of disorder and terror. For over a decade now, Mexico has gone through a painful and difficult period of unleashed violence, extreme forms of dispossession and extractivism, disappearances and killings, naturalized danger, stigmatization, militarization, and multiplication of paramilitary and criminal organizations. My labor, however, refuses the grammar of violence. A trilogy of caves insists on telling stories of collective transformation, healing, celebration, and revenge. The trilogy sings lyrics of disobedience, resilience, and pleasure. The playful plots, however, are fueled by indignation, rage, and refusal in a productive tension with longing, hope, and desire. The characters who populate a trilogy of caves are assemblages of female, male, and zoomorphic features together with powers of the terrestrial, the aquatic, and the celestial spheres. In Mesoamerican worldviews, all the substances, matters, and beings are animated. Divine forces travel to the world of death, where they revitalize and come back in a different shape. I read Mesoamerican myths through queer lenses. Mesoamerican myths carry the potential to provide narratives and metaphors that imagine futurities based in a pluriversal mindset. In my practice, I try to articulate an embodied theory intertwined with nature and matter, a theory that can be danced, smelled, and touched. This sensoriality of plural knowledge can nourish the ground for a decolonial aesthetics as a mode of embracing multimateriality, multitemporality, and pluriversality. I build exuberant, crafty, and low-cost, elaborated handmade paraphernalia and attires. I embrace degraded aesthetics that involve no mastery, but inventive capacities and effective manual labor. The formaldehyde trip imagines modern mystic environmental activist Betty Cariño, 1973-2010, in her politically surrealist transtemporal journey through the underworld, where she finds pluriversal companions formed by Mesoamerican deities, witches, and animals who join her and care for her in order to make her legacy proliferate into the future. Betty speaks from the world of the dead, starting from the very moment of her brutal murder. Her journey is a process of becoming Coyoxauhqui, the Mexica goddess of moon. Perhaps you've seen her as this fragmented woman that appears in a circle, is in Templo Mayor in Mexico City. Who, according to Gloria Anzaldúa, has the faculty to recover from severe harm by putting her fragmented body together again. And this is a faculty that Gloria Anzaldúa called the Coyoxauhqui imperative. In the formaldehyde trip, there's this axolotl. So the axolotl preserved in formaldehyde plays the role of a storyteller, a native educated guide, the object of desire slash research of Alexander von Humboldt, a multiplied dildo, a healing capsule, and a ghostly creature who travels through historical and contemporary forms of extractivism.
Accumulation by dispossession, pedagogies of cruelty, colonial technologies, for death and
Yes. In Heavy Blood, the devastated landscape of an open-pit mine in Zacatecas hosts ghostly creatures designing obstacles against progress. A disoriented, extinct hummingbird looks for the nectar of flowers in a mining area, dwelling among crushed rocks and corrosive air. A lady with copper teeth that resembles Nawa destructive deity Tlanteposilama roars her non-human laments inside a cave. A gang of Mesoamerican voracious creatures enjoy themselves and fulfill their toxic cravings, ingesting politics of inequality. Unwanted and desiring, they are trained for survival under harsh circumstances. But they want something more than survival. They want to play it loud.
Entonces, habría una transformación del mundo.
Flor, caldera interior, guerrero caído en combate, alas batientes que guían a los que desaparecieron como por magia.
Pero no es estoy aquí para decir mi dolor.
Y a reclutar a otras como yo. Porque
A pesar de tanta hazaña, seguimos diseñando obstáculos para el progreso. A pesar de tanta hazaña, nos agazapamos al centro del baldío y calculamos el tamaño de nuestra venganza.
Opossum resilience is inspired on a series of encounters and an interview I had with Zapotec female land defender and lawyer Rosalinda Dionisio. This place-based fabulation is grounded in the valley of Oaxaca, Mexico, and it bastardizes Mesoamerican myths around four figures: a hill, an agave, an opossum, and Lady Reed. Lady Reed is a mythical mystic character who helps the opossum to cut the agave leaves in order to get its sugary alcoholic sap. Opossum resilience overlaps the time of creation with a contemporary socio-environmental conflict around the imposition of a mining project in an indigenous territory. This third part of the trilogy summons the powers of festivity and imagines an opossum providing the activist with the mythical powers to play death and then revive.
Las personas y todas las criaturas hablaban el mismo idioma. Se dice que en ese otro tiempo la tierra tenía otro orden y los cerros se unían. La fiesta es la vuelta de ese tiempo pasado que puede ser futuro, que habita en nuestros sueños del presente, el regreso de las fuerzas que le dan vida al mundo.
We who have been trained to live in zones of disorder and constant exposure to diverse forms of precarization, dispossession, and vulnerability count on ancient vital repertoires that help us living in moments of danger. It is my interest to access these non-conquered knowledges that are pulsating from the cracks of our colonized societies. The sticky simplicity of conviviality, the radical openness to the unknown, the joy of waste despite precariousness, the tenacity to endure in harsh circumstances, and the wonderment at contingent forms of creative belonging. The option for pluriversal and relational worlds is not only still feasible, but has become a matter of life or death. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Naomi and Priscilla, for your wonderful presentations. And thank you, Carla and the Armory Show, for this invitation to contribute to this conversation. And also I wanted to say congratulations, Carla, for putting together such a beautiful section. It's a really, really amazing selection of works and artists. And I wanted to continue what you were saying, Carla, about this, what you just said, that the first territory is the body, and how the body is our first line of defense, and continue thinking about this, and how the body is a landscape, and how in both of your works, in your body of works, Priscilla and Naomi, the body, your own body actually, became a very important vehicle for political statements. And so maybe we can think about that. Priscilla, in your work, there is this autobiographical exploration that confront our relations and gender stereotypes, highlighting how we are shaped, how our subjectivity is shaped in this patriarchal society. And in your case, Naomi, it's more like performative. I mean, you are participating in these multimedia ambitious projects that take the form of video installations, concerts, performative screenings that are confronting the normalization of this neoliberal subjectivity. And I was also feeling that, well, I mean, your works are clearly challenging these forms of oppression, but at the same time they are reclaiming how the body is allowing us to liberate, to create forms of liberation, for invention and collective liberation. So thinking about that, I wanted to ask you about how do you feel about using your own body, and how do you feel that your own body allows you or allows us collectively to remember differently. And I think that in your case, for example, Priscilla, is about remember what was hidden for a long time. And in your case, Naomi, is like remembering what was erased by colonial violence. So, how the body, why using your own body, how the body is helping us to remember differently. And I would add also the humor. I mean, I wasn't aware of this connection, but it's very much present, as you actually mentioned, Priscilla, how humor is creating the space to talk about very serious stuff, how to address that, and create connections, emotional connections with people. And in your case, Naomi, using props, for example, as elements that are creating scenographies on a stage. So yeah, basically that, about why using your own body, how the body is helping us to remember.
Naomi just thought that the cape resembles the body or the belly. And I just reread like this book, Camera Lucida, which is like such a beautiful book. And one part of the book, he was quoting somebody, and then he said that the place we really know, like we really know, is the belly. So that's like the first territory, maybe that we know. And of course, your body is a territory also. And in my case, my body was always like a vulnerable body. Not only in the street, not only in my country, but in my house was a vulnerable body. So it was like a logical step that I started using my body for working. For example, I think I worked with traumas, with my own traumas, but I always had the care of having a distance between what happened and when I do a work,
because if you are immersed in violence or in such an event that you cannot have this distance and you somehow like normalize things. So I would have this care. But our body is somehow fragile, but also is a very powerful body. Powerful that has that can give birth, that eats, that produces milk. That, in a way, a woman's body is a very unruly body. So for a time, like just to give an example, I was doing these trousers made with sanitary napkins, and it was then like a logical path to use it on and wear it on a day that I have my period. And I think doing this, it's like an active life testament, about the things you're taught to hide, and then you bring it to the public sphere, and then it's a way to confront in an active form the landscape you grow in.
Well, right, the cave is considered to be the mouth and the belly of the earth, so for me it's also a way to embrace a sort of visceral knowledge. And well, in my case, I'm always the animal, the guiding animal of the fabulations, but I'm always in relation to other bodies. So we are bodies in relation under a promise of joy, of queer bliss, of astonishment, and there's certain erotism involved when you work with others, and also the way in which you can expand the way you perform, you behave, you relate to others through these, embodiments of these crafty attires. And this erotism, well, reminds me of what Audre Lorde says about the powers of the erotic. The erotic as a way, as a force that makes us feel more powerful in a way that we refuse to accept powerlessness. And there's also this moment of being together in relation, that we come together in relation in order also to refuse the interpolating call of heteronormativity. And also, as we are embodying these monstrous figures, these monstrous creatures, there's also a refusal to be transparent or legible, or to, claim for certain essentialized identities. No, we refuse that. We are always in a process of becoming others, becoming with others, becoming together with nature, with other people, and with non-human creatures. And then, well, I'm also aware that when I turn into an animal, I may be, I'm working on and against certain colonial discourses that render certain subjects as non-human or less than human, like racialized peoples, colonized people, queer people. But I like to work on and against, but also to immerse myself in these powers of transfiguration and bestiality, and I like to linger in this ambivalence, these ambivalent forces.
Thank you. I was also, thinking about how the notion of ritual or rituality is also part of your practices. Like, for example, the chalkboards that you present to Priscilla, these breathing sentences, the traces of this action, this repetitive action, it's like a ritual that is evoking a very specific time in your childhood and subverting, the idea of the homework and it's of course a ritual that you do yourself with your body, creating these sentences and in a very different form. Ritual and choreography is part of what you do, Naomi, in these media projects, and And you actually said something like that you were evoking or calling for ancient repertoires when you were talking, and I really love that idea. And I feel that in both cases, these rituals are quite undomesticated. You know, they are really subverting at that point. And I also feel that they are like spells. You know, like this repetitive action in your case is like a spell that seeks to transform. In both cases, I would say, you know, the emotional structures of society. You know, you are casting spells, and I wanted to ask you about how do you perceive the idea of ritual in your work.
Well, you was talking about repetition, which is what I feel that with the chalkboards, like I should not use repetition. I think repetition comes in my case after a significant event, like if I work with trauma and a significant event, then comes repetition. After that event, only can come repetition. And repetition somehow takes this strength from the first event in a way. It also is a way to remember. If you repeat something, you remember. So by repetition, I guess it's about memory also.
Well, in my case, there's sort of rituality in this aspiration of creating encounters for queer relationality, and when I make my work, I do this as if I'm cooking up a celebration. So there's this act of care, of hospitality, this promise of having fun together that is central to my practice. However, relationality is also risky, it's conflictive, but it's worth it. And so there's this element of creating a sort of creative surrealist belonging that sometimes become and turn into friendships and very strong affective bonds afterwards. So there's an element of affection that is central. And then what else about rituality? Of course, and we come together to refuse the paralyzing forces of fear. We come together to remember those who have been killed, those who have been erased, those who have been disappeared. And we refuse to forget. We refuse actually to heal the wound. We embrace the wound because there are certain things that we cannot get over. And it's also like a way of learning how to live, how to affirm desire in spite of these violent moments that we are witnessing. So, yes, I think that's
talking about the wound, you're both addressing violence on the gender body, violence on the territory, but from different perspectives. But one thing that I've noticed is that you're both using language very intentionally. And I wrote a couple of things that you said. For example, Priscilla, during your presentation, you said the written word as a space of safety, writing as a safe space, just like art. And then Naomi, with your queer fabulations, your storytelling, you said something that really struck a chord with me. My labor refuses the grammar of violence. And I'm wondering how you are both using language as a tool for healing these wounds.
Well, I can start now. Well, I do believe in the healing power of language, of talking, of talking back to power, of writing, and of listening too. And I myself have to say that I'm really indebted to other women who, Jackie Alexander put it, who crossed the fire before me on my behalf. So I found I've traced the genealogy of women of color feminism, from women of color feminism, queer of color critique, colonial feminisms that has offered me shelters, inspiration, nourishment, and also like a vocabulary to articulate experiences as a racialized queer feminist from the global south. So I do believe in the power of language as a healing tool, and I'm trying to contribute to these conversations as if I'm joining a choir, a heterogeneous choir, and my language perhaps is one that exceeds the words because it tries to reach what happens under the skin, what happens in the knots of the throat, that goes down to the guts, and also to the dreamscapes. So it's a language that actually sweats. And as I said, I'm interested in this theory that can teach us how to sing and how to dance in moments of despair.
In my case, as I said before, I learned that written word was a safe space because you cannot confront the other person that you have a response that you want. So I learned that from early on. But also at the time I started working with art, I also started doing psychoanalytic very, very early on. So I think that really helped me a lot with knowing that speaking is in at the same time. But then you can go further than just being seated on a sofa and then just do. You can go and do it in a public way. You can do a public declaration. And then if you have these public declarations, you're not just healing yourself, but you can heal others as well. So maybe that's what is important.
Thank you both so much. This is so beautiful, so lovely. We have a couple of minutes to open up for any questions by the audience. So please, if you have any questions for Naomi or Priscilla, we'd be happy to address them at this moment. Ladies, thank you.
Hi, I was wondering, how do you think about, to go back to the question about ritual, how do you think about movement as part of the ritual itself? Meaning, like, in your work, Priscilla, when you're writing these statements, like, how are you feeling about the movement being a part of the statement itself? And as far as Naomi, when you do your videos, are those videos choreographed in any way? So are there certain things that have to be moved or certain things that have to happen for it to feel like complete for you?
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe there's something in movement because it's like, in my case, it's like when you do a drawing and then some cathartic thing is involved in this kind of drawing. Maybe it's also involved in the movement I do when I'm writing these things. So,
I work with mostly with non-professional performers. I myself am not a professional performer, of course, but we trust also in the powers of transformation through this embodiment of other beings. And so we create these super dilettante choreographies, and I just let things happen. I mean, sometimes there's things that happen by accident, and then it's in editing when you really feel the movement. It's not the moment in which you are performing in front of the camera, it's rather when you're editing it. But there's a lot of room for improvisation, there's a lot of room for mistakes. There's a lot of room to explore the costumes because they really expand the way you use the space and you move. And but yes, I'm pretty much interested in this non-professional way of doing things because there's a way in which you can embrace the autonomous capacities. You don't have to be an expert, but we all know how to move. We all know how to dance. It's not about dancing fantastically. As I said, for me, mastery is not important. For me, it's more about these intuitive capacities to have fun.
Yeah. So, thank you both. I want to ask, it's more than a question. Naomi, you said refuse to forget. And in that, it seems to me that there's a vision that both of you have, which is somehow that art is a form of protest understood as an action test connected to witnessing. So I'd love if you could think or share with us this idea of how you position yourself as both engaged with these stories but also witnessing. What the word, in which way the word witnessing is as an act of protest reminds you or think of it. If you could think of that with us for a moment.
When I was doing the formaldehyde trip, I talked to someone who told me that in Mexico we cannot afford justice, but we can afford memory. So I do think that that's our role, to build different forms of memory that are polymorphous, that can be also twisted, queer, but you can't get over certain things, and that's when also I say there are certain wounds that we have to leave open. And we have to, remember the names, shout the names of those who've been disappeared, killed, etc., collectively. So yes, if we cannot afford justice yet, we have to work on memory. And witnessing, yes, I like the idea of witnessing, kind of witnessing, with, besides witnessing, looking at something, but also being with. Yeah.
Yes, for example, early on I didn't trust the big history, I always trusted the small histories, the stories that doesn't have any book written on it, or things like this. So I think that was my job since the beginning, to speak about these things. And recently, as you say, witness, I was working on these last Polaroids about the bad landscapes, and I was so interested in that, in being a witness, a witness of time, a witness of what happened. And also, I was at a time a bit disturbed by nature, because nature, everything that happened there happened in nature. And in nature is a witness that doesn't do anything. It has no morals, no ethics, no nothing. So it's this kind of witness that covers everything. So I think as humans, we have to have our part in being an active member.
Are there any other questions?
You both mentioned the power of humor in your work, about how it's important to have fun. How it's important to have fun when making also how it's important to have a sense of humor when you're being really serious. I was wondering if you could speak a bit more to the importance of humor, maybe from a political perspective. Thank you.
Yes, I said that if I'm deadly serious, I have to have humor. And I come from a country that if bad things are happening, humor is there. You know, if we have a horrible president now, humor is there. It's there in comics, it's there in memes, it's there in a lot of ways. So I think it's like a very important part in somehow in being active in a different way, like using these metaphors as well as us, and then getting and reaching more people, I think. Not sure, but it's very important.
I don't know if I would use humor in my case. Well, but perhaps it's fun or joy, having fun, and to try to take pleasure seriously. To take pleasure seriously, because that's a way that in which I think you take intimacy seriously into a political project through pleasure and through relational bonds, and having fun together, building these moments of bliss. It's important. It's an important reminder of the vital forces that help you navigating very dark moments, and we are indeed in very dark times globally, right? So I think we have to claim for pleasure, for desire, and even though in my work there's a lot of heavy stuff that is going on, there are violent narratives that are beating under these songs that you would hear. I think it's very important not to create these pain narratives, but these desire-driven narratives that gives you forces and that gives you force in moments of chaos and darkness.
I think our time is up. Or do we have time for another question?
I just want to, this is so beautiful, thank you so much. I suppose a comment. When thinking about language, for me, I go back to the root as often as I can. For example, with a word like humour, I don't know if anyone's heard of like the 4 humours in the body and like medieval science. Like that actually is referring to bodily fluids, and like for me, the power of language is, in remembering the roots of a word and how that's changing, and being both of you are so beautifully intentional with your words, and for me it's hearing these utterances, I'm reminded all of that, so thank you.
Thank you. I want to say thank you all for joining us. Thanks to the Armory Show for giving us the space to talk publicly and the resources to talk publicly about that. And thank you both for your generosity, and Miguel for your intellectuality. So thank you all. Thank you so much.